Thanks, Michelle, for that. So, as part of our discussion on the gender concerns in humanitarian crisis, I felt that we can listen to Kazuri from Kenya. She has been very active in our cohort 2, sharing her comments, sharing her responses. So I felt it is, we will benefit from her insights and our perspective on working in humanitarian crisis and on gender inequalities. So it's now open, floor is open to you, Kazuri. Would you like to use PowerPoint or it's an extempo?
Hi, Damuno, I'll just speak.
Okay, thank you very much. So floor is open for you. Please share your perspective and then we will take forward from there.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to be here. So as Damu said, yes, I'm from Kenya. And currently, even here in Kenya, we are going through a humanitarian crisis. There's a severe drought. And, we have people dying, animals are dying. So that is what we are currently going through. And what the government is doing about it is we have the National Drought Management Agency, which is working with the UN Women, and they're developing a gender responsive policy to enhance government response in this drought crisis that we are currently facing. So in a humanitarian crisis, like I'm sure we already said, women and girls suffer disproportionately because of the impact that the crisis has in the healthcare sector, in education, and also gender-based violence. And, whenever there's such a crisis, it threatens to erase the gains that we've already made in achieving gender equality. Like here in Kenya, when we had the lockdown due to the COVID-19, so assessments were done afterwards, and it showed that, during that 1 year period that we had the countrywide lockdown, there was a spike in child marriages. We had young girls being married off early so that families, can get payment in terms of dowry to sustain themselves. And we had an increase in teenage pregnancies. Most of the times in certain communities, schools are safe places for girls. So when they're at home, they are exposed to sexual exploitation. So there was an increase in teenage pregnancies. There was a rise also in the number of girls who didn't report back to school once the lockdown was lifted. And this for various reasons. Maybe they got pregnant, they were married off, or because there was loss of livelihood, so the parents didn't have money to keep paying for the girl to go back to school. And also cases of unplanned pregnancies went high because there was no access to contraceptives in hospitals because of the disruption that the pandemic caused on basic healthcare services, and as well as also an increase in gender-based violence cases. So those were some of the findings on what the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact it had in Kenya. Yeah, and that goes to show that although generally a humanitarian crisis affects everyone in the population, but women and girls are affected in different ways. And so what can be done? You find that there needs to be, an emergency needs assessment, so to speak, so that you have data on the age or sex, diversity, of the population that is affected by that pandemic, so that you target the relief responses to the specific needs of those who are affected. Find that in most of these where there's been flooding or there's been displacement, you find people are provided with just the same kind of relief package, and you get areas where there are young girls, they might need pads, sanitary pads. So you have to get that kind of data so that you're targeting the kind of response that you're going to take to that area. And this means also integrating gender into the disaster management cycle by educating the women and men who are in the humanitarian sector. So educating them and building their capacity in how different crises affects women and girls differently, so that it is ingrained and they know how to incorporate these strategies in their responses. And that will ensure now there's the gender informed approaches, which now also protect women and girls during a humanitarian crisis. So Kenya has adopted the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And, of course, that's a good global plan, which also incorporates a gender-informed approach to, situations of disaster. And Kenya works closely also with UN Women to review policies and find out how women and girls can be included in humanitarian crisis. Also having more women leaders in the humanitarian system, I think that as well also helps to ensure the needs of women and girls are taken care of, because studies show that humanitarian leadership teams that are more diverse and inclusive perform better and deliver better outputs as opposed to those that are not diverse. And also I forgot to mention that even when these humanitarian actors are going to offer the relief, it's also important to have response teams that are gender diverse, because that also caters for women who might be affected in the population, because some cultures women are only allowed to talk to other women. So if there is no one in the team who's a woman, then you don't meet the needs of this woman who's affected by this crisis. Yeah, so that was my brief input on this very interesting topic. I look forward to any discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Kajuri, for this. I think you have highlighted different vulnerabilities and then the impact, disproportionate impact that it will have on women and girls. And then I'm glad that you mentioned about the disaster risk reduction framework and also gender informed approach. I think what I would like is if you can elaborate little bit on the gender informed approach for the benefit of all people, that will be helpful.
So a gender-informed approach, like in my view and what I've seen here that the government does is it looks into the policies and also distribution of resources to ensure that the gender needs are also catered for. That's what I've seen here.
Yeah, thanks, Kazuria. It's more in terms of reflecting and then repositioning your policies and practices to ensure that they meet the differential needs of the populations. Now, any comments, any clarifications others have to Kazuri's input? Hello. So we are all waiting. If you can. What is your takeaway from Kazuri's input? What resonates? Millicent? Manuela? Jessica?
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, yes, Jessica.
Good afternoon,
Yeah.
everybody. Good morning, good evening.
Okay.
I want to actually add to what, or actually to reinforce what Kasuri has said, especially now that Kenya is facing severe droughts. So if you look at the climate variabilities and the way it is affecting the various gender categories, that is boys, girls, men, women, and people living with disability, and you look at the various parameters of climate change or the various parameters of drought, for instance, when you look at decreased rainfall, frequent droughts, increased temperatures, increased crop and pest, crops and livestock diseases, also increased human diseases, you realize that these various gender categories are affected differently. With the women, boys and girls, and people living with disability being affected more than men. So I want to support what Kasuri has said, that in order to take care of the various gender categories, there's a need for us, of course, to ensure that the distribution of resources, distribution of food, distribution of distribution of food, distribution of water, distribution of things like whatever is required. There's a need for us to ensure that the various gender categories needs, their concerns are well taken care of, even as we are trying to assist them come out of the humanitarian crisis of the drought that we are facing. That's all I can add.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I can say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica, for that addition. Yes, Aiswin?
Hi, Damu.
Hi.
I think Jessica and Kazuri have raised some excellent points. And just to add on to that, I'd like to give an example. So I remember a few years ago when the Syrian refugee crisis had happened, I remember reading an article about how this one particular family was trying to flee the war zone and move to another country on a refugee visa. So they reached out to agent who said that he would help them out, but the agent, he required a fee, and because they were a big family, the agent wanted to charge differently for each member, and unfortunately, because of the crisis, the family was unable to pay them the fee that they had wanted. So instead, the agent said that, okay, if you cannot pay me, it's fine, but then you have to compensate it to me in some other way. Have your wife sleep with me, and in exchange for you all, uh, like passing the passage into another refugee country. And the husband lets that happen because of his helplessness and lack of options, and also, they wanted to flee the religious persecution and war zone casualties that were taking place. And on the way, when they were moving to the other country where they were getting asylum, the younger child that they had started crying, and the parents' efforts to quiet the child were like completely going in vain because the child was not stopping. So the agent took the child away from the parents and threw them in the river or the sea or whatever they were crossing. And it was like a shock for the entire family. So the reason why I narrated this story through this article was the woman in this entire situation was doubly exploited. She was sexually raped and assaulted in a way, even though it was done for a different reason, but she was traumatized. She went through the trauma of unwillingly having to give her body to someone else, and she was not consenting to that, but she was helpless and she had to do that. And the second thing was that she had to lose her child. So the trauma of having her child forcefully taken away from her and thrown into the sea while you're escaping war is even more traumatizing. And because in despite moving back, moving to another nation on a refugee visa, the couple also had some problems. So it was not like the husband was basically punishing her for sleeping with the agent, which she did on his insistence, was now getting tortured for that she betrayed him, she cheated on him. So I feel like here in the war, when a humanitarian crisis happens, it is hard for everybody. I feel like though in this situation the women faced a lot of trauma, harassment, a lot of mental stress and emotional stress of having her body violated, and also grieving and going through the loss of her child who was forcefully taken from her. So I feel like the war casualty is uh, much more traumatizing for a woman because of their gender and their identity. At times they are exploited because of that. So that is all I wanted to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin. I think that is a very moving, uh, moving uh, uh, episode. I think the women become the easy targets. I think that's and then certainly is in terms of they are the trebly vulnerable to these type of things. I think for no fault of theirs, I think they will also be blamed for what they have done on behalf of the men and the society. Thank you.
Absolutely, Damu. Because I'm so sorry to interrupt here, but just
Yeah.
wanted to raise one more point that oftentimes in conflict zones, it is easier to, like you said, it's easier to target women because the honor of the community is often is the women are the pole bearers of the honor, and the enemy side or who the perpetrators often feel that if they can target the women of the community, they can then shame the person.
Yeah.
So shame the entire community or shame an individual entity, in my story being the husband.
Yeah.
So that is just what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin. Catalina?
Okay, hi everyone.
Hi.
In appreciation of the input by Kazuri, from where I sit, my work,
Yeah.
we are unfortunately in the receiving end after maybe, for example, the pandemic. After the COVID-19, we had to deal with the effects. We had early child marriages, we had defilements, and we had children dropping out of school. So, in the course of our work, we got the perpetrators, some of them, the defilers, let me call them the defilers.
Yeah.
Then we had maybe the parents to the girls who had been married off. Now, when we were working, there's a case we had two mothers, the mother to the boy, but the boy was a man because he was past 18. And now the girl was 17, just a few months shy of 18 years. In Kenya, 18 years is the age of the majority. You are termed as an adult. So when we were doing our inquiry, we discovered these mothers gave up their daughter because they thought it was ignorance. Now that she's in a relationship with a man, it's okay that she can get married. Little did they know that that was against the rights of the children. So
Yeah.
they got themselves into problem and found themselves in court.
Yeah.
But then when we talked to them, they were just ignorant of the law. If they had known the law that governs the children, they would not have sent the child to get married. They would have ensured that she went back to school. Then, of course, the child had to go back to school. But a month later, she had to drop off because she was pregnant. So it became just a complete mess of her life. And unfortunately, in the last 2 years, she gave birth. She went to be married to the same man. And now she's still in a problems because now last month, she came to my office and the man was sending her away. So now we are in a problem. We have to consult with the children's office to help this girl who is now 18, but she was defiled when she was a child.
Yeah.
So information is so crucial, and especially with the rights regarding the girl child and the child in general. So, and in law, this ignorance is not defense. So they'll find themselves in conflict with law despite being ignorant of the law or lacking knowledge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Helena?
Thank you. I'll briefly give an input. And I want to say thank you, Eshina, because what she said just jogged my memory about situations that I've seen happening around in some communities, especially here in Kenya. You find that there are cases where you have families with very little resources, or even wealthy families, having to marry young girls off so that the family can earn more wealth, or even earn a little wealth if they're not if they really don't have enough resources. And most of the time, if a girl gets married early, she earns dowry for her family, and the same dowry is used by the boys to pay dowry. So like a boy would want to marry, but because he doesn't have dowry, one of his sisters is married off, even if she's young, so that the boy can find something to pay dowry. In some cases, you find girls being married off to earn something for the boys to go to school. So the boys get educated, they get empowered. In the process, the young girls miss out on education. Of course, they lose their bargaining power. And especially within the marriage, they're not able to talk or defend themselves in any case. They're not empowered. And so they're not even aware of, ways of defending themselves, ways of earning income. They have to learn a lot of things the hard way. So I think poverty and hardship really exposes girls, especially in areas where people are not empowered. Yeah.
Thanks, Helena. I think we are so good in terms of looking in terms what are the vulnerabilities different and disproportionate to women and girls during humanitarian crisis. Anyone else? Yes, Aiswin?
Damo, I had another point to raise here.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all had the opportunity to see the Afghanistan crisis that happened some time ago.
Yeah.
And the ISIS has taken control over the country, and things have changed in the country for the worse. And I remember reading an article how the state-sponsored terrorism and the new government of the ISIS has stopped the women from getting their formal education in schools and universities. They have literally locked the universities. They have banned the women from entering the universities. Their male counterparts can enter, but they cannot. And I remember seeing one of the videos where the women were protesting against it, and they literally had the ISIS men, they literally had like these wooden sticks and rods with them, trying to beat the women into leaving. So at times I feel like when the humanitarian crisis in a country happens, this state sponsored terrorism, like it's happening in Afghanistan situation, they're also trying to suppress the voice of women, because I personally and fundamentally believe that all of us have a power to change from within. And women in Afghanistan, if you see the history, ever since ISIS took control back in the 90s, they have been suppressed. They have been denied education. They have been told that they cannot leave their homes without a man who is related to them. And it has been told that a woman will have to be controlled by a man. So, and it is not that in this current scenario, the men are also being allies to the women. They are also not going to the universities. They are also protesting against this entire rule of women not being able to study. But the problem is that when uh, I personally feel when you educate a woman, you educate a family. So when you are trying to stop a woman from getting her education, you're denying her the fundamental right which will allow her to change the entire story of her life. I think that's when the downfall of a society happens. And this is what exactly is happening in Afghanistan at the moment, that where women are being denied uh, the platform to raise their voice against the grievances that they are focusing on and the grievances that they're going through. So the suppression and the oppression of women still is very much prevalent across different regions where the political unrest or war is happening at the moment, be it Afghanistan, be it Ukraine, or be it the war crimes that are taking place in Ukraine and Russia. So in all of these, the commonality is that women are being, women are the main victims here.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashwin. I think it's very, very well said. I think in terms of how are women exposed to during the crisis, I think time and again, I think it proved that they are the most sufferers beyond their own control. I think that's what we need to look at in terms of how does this affect the growth and development of women and girls is an area that one need to be concerned, and what role the men would play in terms of helping or not helping them. Kazuri and then Jessica.
Yeah, just to add on what Ashwin said,
Yeah.
that even especially in situations where the humanitarian crisis is as a result of conflict or war, and you find that men are being killed, then it also leads to an increase in female-led households.
Yeah.
And you find that also where it's a single parent, a single woman, who's the head of the home, and she's working, and you have instances where women are generally women are paid less for the work they do compared to men. So it also increases the levels of poverty among women and households.
I think that's a very good point. I think this is one of the aspects we looked in terms when we were discussing on feminization of poverty, is one in terms of increase in female-headed households or single parent households is also another form of poverty. Yeah. Thanks, Kajuri, for that addition. Jessica and then Cynthia. Jessica, you had a point to make?
Not really.
Okay, then Cynthia, Sister Cynthia.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Nice to be here. Even with, will I say, the elites or those who are advantaged, crisis also disadvantage the woman. Sometimes you find people, you have two groups of migrants. Those go voluntarily, they enter a country with papers. Then the forced migrants are the most vulnerable. Disasters even create more of their vulnerability. In certain countries, even with those who move voluntarily, they get into the place. They have laws that prevent the woman from working. Now, a family moves to another country. The man is allowed to work. The woman is not allowed to work, which means she becomes completely economically dependent on the husband. Yeah. Apart from the, the challenge of a one person as the financial, that is in charge of the finances. This also creates some challenges within the family structure because, like we all know, sometimes even in a good relationship, when a man is broke, he becomes the closest people to him suffer, the wife and the children, especially when they make demands on, financial demands. So you can imagine what it is like for somebody who moves voluntarily. Now we're talking about Southern Africa. We've been reeling under what they call Hurricane Freddy. A section of South Africa, more than they've stopped counting the number of people dead because they cannot ascertain. There are those who are missing. Mozambique, Botswana, we are just lucky. Our desert is absorbing it, but people are being rendered homeless. Then you can imagine the plight of that woman, that girl, who is not educated, what, name it. And now they are forced to move with no income. The division or the gap continues to widen every day. So disasters even compound what is already in existence that maybe we're trying to bridge the gap. So my take on it is building resilience in people, because these disasters are becoming very frequent and we keep on doing a paracetamol, we respond. What about building resilience? Because if that resilience is built, this then gender disparity that happens again and again when there are disasters, whether it is man-made or it is natural, continues. So somewhere along the line, as we continue to find a way to bridge the gap, we can also begin by building the resilience, the capacity to cope, even in a situation that is not normal, because that will really, 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 really help, because we are having a generation of children, go to the refugee camps, a generation of children who are angry, male, female, boys, girls, yes, angry, that are waiting to spew their anger on the world. And we are the ones causing it. So disasters of any kind continues to widen. The plastic or what is elastic is almost at its limit. It will snap. And when it snaps, when women become violent or rebel, it's worse than when men protest. Honestly, I think it's reaching a stage where the women themselves will wake up one day and decide, okay, we have seen it all, we are ready to die. And they will take up, I don't know the way they will go about it, because sometimes I get tired of, how do you put it, diplomatic words. Honestly, I feel like shouting or screaming at an official, but I cannot. One, because of my position. Two, the people whose voices I'm carrying. If I do something of that nature, I actively go out for protests, as in protest. I know they are the ones who will still suffer. So I try to use words to talk to somebody, you're looking at the person and say, for crying out loud, are you human? So I don't know. Sometimes I just think and I think and I think and I say, God, help us, because the human beings you have created, we have totally lost it. So that's my contribution.
Very heart-touching, Sister Cynthia. I think these are the challenges we face as part of this. I think I appreciate the way. I think what you touched on, the women's economic independence, is the causality of the humanitarian crisis, and I think it's a compounding effect. And then the resilience, I think we need to look at in terms of how do we harness that? How do we capitalize this? To look at how do we overcome these challenges or attempt to overcome these challenges. Thank you, Sister Cynthia. Aiswin, you want to make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to raise a point. I remember when I was pursuing my master's in the UK, my professor shared one of her fieldwork incidents where she had gone to I don't remember the region that she had gone to, but where she had gone to carry out her research. She was basically researching on the conditions of living conditions of people in the refugee camps and the rehabilitation centers that were that were that were established in order to rehabilitate the refugees who were affected by war in the region that she was carrying out the research. And it was a government sponsored study. And I remember she said that when she was interviewing her subjects, the women said that at times the police that was responsible for safeguarding them in the rehabilitation camp oftentimes harassed them and assaulted them. There were incidents of rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment from the people, from the agencies that were responsible for safeguarding them and their interests. So she raised a very interesting point that how people in a position of power, especially when it comes to military or police personnel who are responsible for taking care of the people in situations of unrest, oftentimes misuse that. And we then see an escalation of cases of gender-based violence against women and, of course, against men. But in this specific case, where she spoke about how women were uh, sort of being assaulted because one of the women said that that was done because to earn their keep to live in that refugee camp. And it said that they had to do that because the police was there to serve them. So that was very interesting to me, that they in a very authoritative manner said that to the victim and forced themselves on them. So I feel like sometimes the safeguards or the defenders who are there to protect your interests at times end up exploiting you, and give all sorts of excuses that are there to justify their actions. Thank you.
Yes, Ashwin, I think this is they take advantage of their situation. I think the unfortunate thing is institutions or people who are expected to protect are themselves are perpetrators. So I think that's where we need to look at it. And then these type of situations where we are talking about camps is a potential ground for these abuses. And as a result, what Cynthia was saying in terms how do people react to this? Because they are helpless and then they are made to suffer this. And so naturally they build up anger, not only towards those individuals, to the entire society. Yeah, these are all the consequences of this work. Yes, Sister Cynthia, you want to add? And
just a quick one.
Yeah.
Yes, this type of abuse in many of these facilities that help our vulnerable people, it's ongoing. I'm even surprised that the person who did that research and is government sponsored was allowed access to the people. Usually there are so many barriers to get to the people to know exactly what is happening. And a vulnerability of any sort, especially when you no longer have a voice, is the worst that can happen to any human being. Each day there is rain. Since this, I say, God, our people here, I don't think we have the resilience to withstand if there is the calamity that has fallen many nations, for us maybe to move from one place to the other, looking for a place of safety. So part of what I've heard a lot of conversations on this page, advocacy, speaking out, denials will be there. But are these abuses of power over, being abused with impunity? Yes, it continues. And it is so sad. Why I say it's sad is you are lucky you have been given power. And the person you are abusing could be is your mother, is your sister. Because there is no human being under this earth who was not born of a woman, nobody. And that is part of the campaign strategy I have used when I hit a brick wall with people whose mindset are not ready to change. I put it like, if this person was your daughter at 13, has been violated, and you're heeing and hawing, getting justice for her, how would you feel? Even the body reaction will tell you that they wouldn't want to tolerate. Then why are you? So somehow, in contact with people, that is the methodology I use, trying to arouse their consciences so that that conversion towards the human person happens, especially for the women, girls that have been enfranchised. Also being conscious of the fact that we should not leave the boy child of today behind. Because sometimes you see them react that our sister, every time when you come, it's always the girls, the girls, the girls, what about us? So it's something that working with them on the ground, I try to strike a balance, because if we leave them behind again, in the next 10 years, I will be talking about equality for our brothers and our men. But to try and help people to begin to think like human persons, to begin to think like people who also feel pain, especially when they have that authority, power over the other. The laws are there. Honestly, the laws are there. I won't join, I have to go off now. That's why I just want to conclude. I won't be able to join tomorrow because I'm going to the second camp where I go to. It's 2 hours from where I am. I usually leave in the morning around 7:30. Arrival back home is about 6 o'clock. The camp manager, the officials there are human beings, really, really working to help this people. You know why? One of them has worked with UNHCR. So he has seen humanity. So he's also helping us to spread this message of conversion, of looking at the other as a human person, particularly the women and the children. Because men sometimes can run. A woman will look for her child before she looks for property. Yeah. And that's just the truth. So in our encounter with people on a day-to-day basis, let's talk about these things. It will take time, but be patient, keep on. Ask some of these questions that challenge the conscience. They will not agree with you initially, but after a while, you see little changes here and there of behavior. And that is what we are actually praying and looking for, to have allies, especially with our men who are still occupying about 80% of the authority to make decisions that can create any social change that can rewrite this narrative. So with this, I say thank you very much. I have to exit. I have another meeting. And thank you so much for this program.
Thank you.
God bless everyone.
Sister Cynthia. Okay, now let's, I think that will be a right time for us to move to the next aspect. Now, having looked in terms of how women and girls are disproportionately and differently affected by humanitarian crisis, I think she has started saying how she looked in terms of addressing those, probably to raising consciousness of people. What do others think? How did your own strategy or programs address this, or what shifts you have made in your own program or strategies to see that you address the vulnerabilities of women and girls? If you are already working on it, if those who are not working, then how do you like to make a shift? What shifts you would like to make? Am I clear? Hello? Hello?
Come again, Damo.
Thanks, Katrina. What I'm asking is, now we have debated on the diverse vulnerabilities that women and girls experience at times of humanitarian crisis. I'm saying that moving forward, what shifts you had to make to address these type of vulnerabilities in your work? If you are already working on disasters, I'm asking, did you make any shift in your programs, in your strategies to address them? Or if you are not, what do you propose to do it? If you are going to be responsible for work on humanitarian crisis, what shifts you need to make in the programs or strategies to address these diverse vulnerabilities that women and girls experience? Am I clear, Katrina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Francisca Nobre, can I hear from you?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Dam.
Yeah.
I'm challenging. In my community, it's raining a lot,
Yeah.
and just join it now.
Okay.
They are flooded, and we are at risk. It is something calling cyclone.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
are coming from Madagascar,
Okay.
so even now it's raining in Maputo, Mozambique.
Oh, okay. 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 Very good. Okay. Okay. That's anyone else? What do you think? How do you like to respond to and address these vulnerabilities? Yes, Jessica?
Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, we look at the policies. And taking the example of Kenya, if you examine most of the policies that are existing and gender blind, apart from
So
probably
Yeah.
the policy, the 2019 policy on gender and development. So the first intervention I think or shift that we can take is ensuring that the various policies are gender responsive. Then after coming up with the policies that are gender responsive in terms of the strategic and practical on gender needs and concerns. Then the next thing is to ensure that we come up with gender responsive interventions. Interventions, because already we have talked of the way the various gender categories are affected differently and it is proportionally, wherever, yeah. So we come up with gender responsive interventions, for example, now in the distribution of resources that are required to ensure that each and every gender category has tailor-made responses. That's what I can say.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
Responses are tailor-made to ensure that they fit the required gender category.
Thank you, Jessica. I think you touched in terms of we need the need to look at the policies to see how gender responsive are they. Aiswin and then Kazuri.
Unfortunately, till now, I have had a lot of educational experience and field experience, but it has not been in conflict zones or war zones. However, if in future I do get an opportunity to go there, I feel like I think these suggestions that I'm about to make will have a good impact in helping curb those instances. So I think it is pivotal to enact more inclusive laws and policies, programs and services that safeguard the interest of women who might experience gender-based violence in a war zone or experience it in a humanitarian crisis in any of the regions across the globe. And I think in order to begin rehabilitating them in their refugee countries or host countries that they relocate to, or even if they cannot relocate to for whatever reason, continue living in the war zone, I think internationally we must adopt a gender survivor sensitive approach and implement strategies and amendments for protecting human rights better. Because oftentimes when we hear of any humanitarian crisis or war happening or conflicts taking place, we always see a lot of human rights violation that takes place, and we simply must come up with a solution in order to address that issue. And I think all of these agents will play a crucial role in sort of bridging the gap that currently exists in the legislation across the globe. So I think it is, of course, region specifications and region specific exceptions and particularities will have to be included to better suit the needs of the victims and survivors in that particular region. But I think internationally also we need to come up with safeguards, better policies, so that we can, at a global level, we can better rehabilitate the survivors and the victims. So I feel like these are a couple of strategies that I would incorporate in my work and I would want implemented in the coming time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin. I think that you gave a broader perspective in terms of how the norms beyond the nation. I think there is need for how do you raise an international commitment to it. Thank you very much, Ashwin. And then Kazuri.
Okay, so I can say also involving the recipients of this humanitarian aid. So you involve them in decision making. Yeah. And then also having accountability mechanisms, because it's not enough to just finance, but also have accountability to ensure that the people are receiving the aid and it's not your own staff who are perpetuating some of these gender inequalities. So accountability mechanisms.
Yeah. Thanks, Kazuri. I think that's very, very, very important. How do we ensure accountability too? Yeah. Anyone else? Any other aspects that we can look at it? I think we looked in terms of what can be done at the community level, we could at the state level and at the international level. What are the shifts that we need to make? Anyone else would like to join? Yes, Catalina?
Okay. Building on the accountability, I would like to begin from the unit, the individual. When we get our girls, our women who are being violated, and we usually work with them and try to reach their families. And if we can give these girls and women education that they, or knowledge that they will use to avoid future abuse, that is what we do in our places of work. We try to include the wider community, beginning with the immediate and even with the perpetrator. If we can, okay, we are into community corrections. Some of the abuse against the women and girls are admissible in our work. So we try to get to the perpetrator so that we can educate them. And then if they are girls and boys, we try to get them to educate their peers so that we can now break the cycle of abuse to these specific groups or clients we have with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Catalina. I think that's very important because we cannot exclude the perpetrators. We need to see how do we engage with them, how do we bring a transformation in their attitude and behavior. Ashwin, you want to make a point?
Yes, I just had one more point to add. I also wanted to say that it would be nice when we're talking about implementation of strategies and coming up with policies and amendments to have a very transparent approach and discussion involving the primary stakeholders. Now, when I say primary stakeholders, I mean the young girls and women who have been victims and survivors in this particular situation that we're talking about. So, people who have had the opportunity to get rehabilitated into their refugee countries and have had the time to go through mental health issue, solving their mental health trauma. I feel like those people, because they've also gone through this trauma of escaping conflict zones, can work with the government agencies to come up with concrete plans about how they can better rehabilitate victims and survivors, because they would know the needs better, because having their lived experience would be an added advantage here, because they could then better structure the blueprint of the program here so that the this, the safeguarding of the victims and survivors escaping war zones can be done in a holistic manner, because I feel like when we talk, it's always good to have a transparent discussion with people who've gone through that situation, so that whatever services or help that they probably needed back then was not given can now be given to the ones who are actually going through the situation. So their lived experience here can be can be like a positive, I would say a positive addition in coming up with holistic implementational strategies or policies when we talk about helping young women and young girls escape gender-based violence in different areas. Thank you.
That's a good point. I think we need to look at it them. How do we involve the rights holders whose rights have been abused in all aspects of the work, right from planning to implementation and to assess and to reflection of those. I think that's a wonderful point. Amit, you must be working on the disasters. Why don't you share the CMES experience? What shifts you were able to make from the experience? Jackia, Amit or Jackia, can you share your experience of work on disasters? Jackia, Amit. Okay. Anyone else? Achong, Dorcas, Grace, who has not so far? Manuela, Michela, Natalia. Yeah, Natalia is there. We didn't hear you, Natalia, today.
Yes, I'm in the office. That's why I'm a bit quiet.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm writing at the moment.
Okay, fine. Yeah. No, any other person would like to add to whatever I think we heard from Jessica, Isvin, Catalina, Sister Cynthia? Okay, let me ask, what would you avoid to be sensitive to these vulnerabilities? What practices would you avoid? We said what we can do, but I'm saying what you would deliberately ensure that you are not part of it. Yes, Kajuri. I'm glad,
Yes,
Kajuri,
so
that you are very active as usual.
you make sure you're not part of those who are exacerbating the gender inequalities. So, I would avoid doing that. And I would also avoid situations where, because in most instances, it's like here in Kenya, it's non-governmental organizations that provide humanitarian aid. Yeah, very rarely in partnership with the government. Yeah, but the large part is the non-governmental organization. So if I was in government, I would avoid interfering with the work of the NGOs. Instead, I would support their work, so that because they are the biggest partners in this addressing humanitarian crisis.
Thank you, Kazuri. I think the very significant one is that you would deliberately ensure that your shifts in programs and strategies do not contribute to intensifying the gender inequalities. I think that's bottom line. That's where we need to look at in our own enthusiasm to address the vulnerabilities. Are we contributing to reduction or increase in the vulnerabilities? Is something that probably we need to be conscious of. Thanks, Kazuri.
And also because let me, sorry for this, to cut you short. Also because whenever there's a humanitarian crisis, there's always the urgency, the need to act fast. Yeah. So in that haste, you might end up exacerbating. So it's good to be aware.
Yeah. Any other comments? What can be avoided? I think very significant ones we said. I think the nature of humanitarian crisis, as Kazuri was saying, it demands, because also one of the options in your discussion forum is in terms of taking action now, because whenever and wherever there are disasters, it cannot wait for action. It demands immediate actions. So in that demand for immediate action, how conscious are we to ensure that the gender inequalities do not get intensified? Anyone else? I would like other people. Manuela, Michela, Millicent, Helena, you are quiet for some time.
I came in a little late, and so I've just been following. Yeah, silently. Yeah.
Okay. Because you have been very active in terms of sharing your thing. So, Grace?
Well, sometimes it gets me a little off guard, or it's something new, so I have to listen and just follow.
Grace, any comments? Yes, Catalina?
In addition, I think that will avoid the blame game and finger pointing, because this one might create more resistance and a rift, meaning that we'll not be able to get into helping people who have been affected, and then we will be in even perpetuating the inequalities that are existing or that are being caused by the crisis.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Natalia. I think I read your chat in terms of respond to the vulnerabilities should expand the means of communication, share information, build shelter and other means of secure accommodation, create an access for people who have been assaulted, limiting risk factors associated with violence, restricting the sale and access to lethal weapons in a period of exorbitant stress, potentially reducing the risk of feminicide and infant death. Thank you very much, Natalia. Any other ideas? Okay, now let me ask in terms of having spent an hour on this, if I ask you, what are the takeaways, key takeaways from this discussion the last 1 hour? What are your quick comments? How was this discussion in the last 1 hour useful? What insights? What are the insights that we can carry forward, take forward? Yes, Kazuri and then Catalina.
Okay, so my key takeaway is that there is no equality when it comes to a humanitarian crisis. It is a fact that women are disproportionately affected by a humanitarian crisis, and there is need to be aware of that and take active steps to incorporate gender issues even in our responses to a humanitarian crisis.
Thank you, Kazuri. That was very, very important one. Catalina?
That all people, male, female, girls, boys, should be involved in trying to resolve the inequalities that are present, or those ones are caused by the disasters and the humanitarian crisis.
Yeah. Thank you. I think, yeah, Kazuri has mentioned in terms of that we need to be conscious and address the gender issues in humanitarian crisis in terms of disproportionate and different impact it has. And then Catalina has added that we need to look at involving the stakeholders, the men, women, boys and girls, in evolving the response and recovery plans. Yes, Jackia?
Thank you very much, Damoji. Yeah. A humanitarian crisis emergency is not event. Serious event that represents a critical threat of health, safety, security, well-being of a community or other large group of people, usually over one wide area. Our activity, CMES, participating and young women, men and boys group have been given various life skills awareness training, such as what is coronavirus, how it symptom coronavirus, what protect should be taken coronavirus, are made aware of this issue. Men and boys training activity are implemented by maintaining a distance of 3 feet, 15,000 members of the community made aware of that what is the various, how it separate symptom coronavirus, what should be taken for addition to childhood child marriage, in order to implement the activity of the project. 12 coordinate meeting were held on the remote rural area of the work area of the issue of child marriage, early marriage, reproductive health and rights, trafficking, women abuse, dowry, empowerment, women empowerment rights, reproductive health and rights, human rights awareness program. Local community and local government involving other stakeholders.
Thank you, Jackie. I think there are two comments which before I ask Jessica to do it. I think Millicent, I think it's a very significant concern is in terms of the how is the relief and rehabilitation work is hijacked by others and avoiding it to reach out to really needy people. And the second one is in terms of corruption. Corruption or other ill practices. I think what she was talking about is how is the relief and rehabilitation is depriving communities. And then Chong saying I take is that government and other stakeholders ought to be holistically prepared to respond to humanitarian crisis. The response should be gender sensitive, considering the fact. Yeah, one is in terms of preparedness, the other one is in terms of sensitivity. That is what Achang is saying. And Jessica? Jessica, you raised your hand. Would you like to share your comment? Jackie, you have something more to add? Jackie, your hand is still up.
Yes, Damo.
Yeah.
Disaster, we provide immediate aid the people help cope better. We provide relief aid such as food, cloth, clean drinking water, etc. To affected victim to help them cope better with the stress. We also rehabilitation work such as building home, depending on the need of our in the hour. Local procession and government authority such as.
Okay, Jackie, thank you. Jessica?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. My take on this is that humanitarian crises are natural and you cannot be able to get rid of them because they are real. And when they come, they affect the various gender categories differently and disproportionately. For instance, they will affect girls, boys, women, and those people living with disability differently. Therefore, if we are supposed to deal with them, there's a need for us at the local, national, and international level to come up with gender responsive policies and gender responsive interventions that address the various needs, the various concerns of the various gender categories, that is boys, girls, women, and people living with disability. So as we come up with interventions, which might be either in the form of policy or otherwise, for sure we need to come up with gender responsive, tailor-made for the specific gender categories. That is my take.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I think you hit the nail on the head. And so we need to look at how do we, that the policies need to be gender responsive. And then we need to advocate for such things. Okay, thank you. Jessica? Anyone else? What's the takeaway from today's discussion? Anyone else? Dimfu Ramadi, Dorcas Muchu. We haven't heard you. Can you share what are your takeaways? Okay, Iswin, we understand. So anyone else? Seem to be a lot of silence. Manuela? Michelle, can we hear from you?
Hello, good afternoon
Yes,
again.
Michelle. Yeah.
Actually, I was writing,
Okay.
but I would just say that I would add on to the last statement, saying that the government should be more proactive rather than reactive. We spoke of some especially natural disasters that is very common during certain period of the year, and we keep on every year having the same problem. So this is my contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. But I think that was very, very important aspect, that the takeaway is that the state need to be proactive rather than be reactive. Natalia, I think my key takeaway is that we have a long way to go, and it's all our responsibility if we need to resolve. We engage girls as well as boys at the young age, create strategies that protect women and men and girls and boys equally. Yeah. Vivian, I saw you. Didn't hear from you. Vivian, you have any comments to make? What's your takeaway from today's discussion? I would encourage people who have not spoken so far to share their comments. Thank you, Jackie, for your thumbs up.
Yeah.
Helena, I think that's the right way to conclude. Helena, you should be the last.
Mine is a little brief, but as I listen to the discussion, I would tend to think that in as much as we want to look for solutions, but there may not be any blanket solution because of the cultural differences and backgrounds. Considering what Aishwin put in about the example she gave about the Afghanistan situation. Yeah, because you see, you want to involve every stakeholder, every gender, but because of the religious and cultural setting, and because of, how would I put it? How is it? How do you call it? The high-handedness involved. Yeah, it is not easy to have, a blanket solution. Yeah, different countries have their own ways of, handling things. Yeah.
Thank you, Helena. I think that that's wonderful. I think we need to, there is no one single solution. We need to look at it, how it can be contextual, and then how do we take it forward. I think that's very, very important. I think the Catalina was saying, we have policies. How do we also ensure that they are enforced and implemented properly? I think that with that, thank you very much for your participation. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, because tomorrow is unscheduled. So, but we thought we will spend time in terms of the importance of valuing women's unpaid care work as an economic contribution to the household and to the national economy. So see you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you very much for your wonderful participation today. See you tomorrow. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.